Want to record this as well? Okay, got it. Okay, I'll start sharing my screen. Okay, are you guys able to see my screen?
Yep, we can see the presentation.
Yes. Cool. So thank you everyone for joining today on Friday. So I think you all will have plans for the evening, hopefully. So we'll try to, wrap it up in the allotted time. So before we start, just I want to give small introduction how I got introduced to Databricks. So I would like to thank the project Elanco. Before that, I was working with ADF, Azure Data Factory. I was using some of the other Azure services, but I always had this question in mind that for what do we use Databricks for? So I think over the past 9 or 10 months, I got a little idea or a fair idea of how this works. Although I was not part of implementation, they were mostly enhancements. But I think I have gathered enough information that I can share with you guys so that you can also start your journey on Databricks. So having said that, let's try to understand what the agenda would be for today. We will focus mostly on the demo. So as this call is being recorded, so I would encourage everyone, if you get time, maybe in the coming days, go through the video again. Just try to do the practical as much as you can. So we'll quickly glance over the theory. We'll try to understand what is Databricks, and then we'll take a deeper dive in the demo, and we'll see Databricks in action. So let's start with Databricks. So to understand Databricks, you first of all have to think of its evolution or how it came into picture. So and you will have the definitions from internet and the definitions that I think would be sufficient, because it's always good to understand the terms and technologies, envisioning your own concept, and using your own logics, if I were to say. So first of all, let's discuss about Apache Spark. So this Apache Spark is a unified analytics engine for large-scale data processing. Just think of it as a group of machines or PCs that would do the job for us in a parallel fashion. So let's say I've given a request to this Apache Spark. It will use some of the clusters. So we also refer to these machines as clusters. So it will spin up those clusters and it will help us do the job in a parallel manner. And the capabilities of Apache Spark is, very vast. So that is why when you have big data that is, that is higher in volume, that is where you can really leverage this Apache Spark technology. Now, the same company that introduced or that discovered Apache Spark also built Databricks. So Databricks is a company, by the way. So let's read the definition. So Databricks combines the best of data warehouse and data lakes to offer an open and unified platform for data and AI. So what they have done is they have provided a web-based platform so that it becomes easier for the users to use Apache Spark. They have packaged, so you can, in other words, you can say that they have packaged in a way which will be, web-based friendly, so that you can play around with. It becomes easier for the end user to use Apache Spark. Now comes Azure Databricks. So Azure Databricks provides the latest version of Apache Spark and allows you to seamlessly integrate with open source libraries. So think of it as a Microsoft. Microsoft is known for its good user interfaces that makes the job easier, so that we don't have to scratch our head in order to use a particular technology. So all Azure or Microsoft has done is they have included this in their Azure service stack. So this particularly falls under the Azure data service stack, and they have given us better capabilities. So for example, we were talking about the machines. Now using Azure Databricks, it becomes easier to select how many clusters we want, whether we want a single cluster or we want more than one cluster, depending upon the workloads. So yeah, so just understand that Apache Spark is a computing engine whereas Azure Databricks gives us capability to not only spin up the clusters or the machines, but also to write the code so that we can send requests to Apache Spark. So this is how I have understood it. Even though we cannot really cover the definitions of these three in a single session. It would really take multiple sessions for that. But I hope this definition is clear. So moving on to the next slide. So why do we need Databricks? What is the important thing that they provide, which makes our life easier? So, and just taking a step back, and I understand that some of you guys are not from your data world. You might be from front end application world where you have been involved in front end application development. But I try to use the terms or the names which is familiar with everyone. So first of all, as I said, Databricks is purely a data service. So if you have a requirement where you have to do something with the data, then only you will look for this as a candidate. And especially if you have a big data, because if you have a small chunk of data, this might not make sense, or you might not be able to justify because of the costing aspect. So let's talk about the users of Databricks. Let's say in your team, you have data engineers, you have business users who are mostly interested in reports, and you have data scientists who are doing some predictive modeling or other stuff. So all these teams or all these people can work under single roof. So you can provision a single workspace. So we use a term workspace whenever we try to provision Azure Databricks account. We will soon see that in action. So all of these guys can work under the same roof. Otherwise, without this, what would happen is, for example, if you are a data scientist, you would need some special tools like RStudio. If you know about these, some other tools where you would do the coding and do the analysis. And if you're data engineers, you would use some ETL or SSIS, sorry, on-prem tools like SSIS or cloud tools like ADF to get the job done. Especially for business users, you will have to move the data into a separate layer or a dedicated layer where they can, connect their reports and see the results. So it solves that purpose. So all of these people can work together under, using a same tool. So this is how the users of Databricks they look like. Now, any questions before up till here? Because I just wanted us to quickly move into the demo session because
Yeah.
yeah.
Lokesh,
Sure. Yeah.
just from a naive user perspective, we can give a real life use case so that a lot of people can relate on where this actually helps us. Like, these days you see a lot of pattern recognition, document scanning, all those things. Like in the medical world, we are searching for vaccine, we are searching for other things, right? So just want to understand where Databricks sit in those kind of solutions. Like we're doing a lot of video capturing. Like for example, in Elanco, they do monitor pets, and then they have videos. So they are looking for a solution where you can capture the motion of a pet that is in a particular care center. So where does Databricks sit in those scenarios? How does it help us, make things easier? Like, where you need to sit and do manually. How does Databricks help us in all these scenarios, or does it have any other use cases in the real life?
So I think what we are talking about, what you are talking about, is maybe you are discussing about the data scientists when it comes to the team. I think you want to know what data scientists do. So we can cover that, but I think so in order to answer you, so let's say you want to do some predictive modeling, or I think you also talked about AI. So you can use a single tool for that, right? So I would not be able to. So I think this session is not to discuss the details of how that would be done, but everything that you can think of that involves predictive analysis or AI, you can use Databricks for that. But that
Okay.
would fall under the data scientist category. So like, if you want to predict, let's say you're searching for a product in Amazon, the products that are displayed at the bottom that are suggested as recommendations. So that falls under, I'm not sure under which technology it falls under, but I mostly think it falls under predictive modeling. But yeah, all sort of things you can do. But how much, how much, implementation you can do with that, that is something that I would not be able to, answer. But
No problem.
I believe, I believe all the user cases that you talked about can be covered using Databricks. Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, let's move on. So for the demo session, what would we need? We would require an Azure account, obviously. And then we would need an Azure ADLS Gen 2 account with hierarchical namespace enabled. Ideally, if you have a CSV file, that would be useful as well. So this fourth thing, I think the first three things are pretty easier to, it's not easier. Maybe you can set it up or you can get the files easily. But the fourth one, Python CLI, is something that might be not that straightforward. So I do have, a blog on this. So if you are doing this demo on your own, you can always get in touch with me. So what I've done is on my machine, I've already installed the Python CLI. So whenever that is required, I will just open the command line window. I can run those commands. But you would need some steps in order to get this Python up and running on the machine. So you can reach out to me offline on that. So what we would be doing is, so we will have a file placed in ADLS storage, and we will try to read that file using Databricks. And we will also, explore a bit of Scala language. Again, I'm not an expert on that, so I'm just at the beginner level. So whatever, just a second, guys. So whatever I have learned, I'll just try to share with you. And then we'll see something, we'll get to read about, or we'll get to see in action about the delta tables. So what happens is, in short, is whatever files that you have stored, especially the CSV or the text files in your ADLS, you could create a abstract table on top of it, which is called a delta table. And you can, so what it benefits us is that it gives us the ability to fire a SQL query like language. So for example, if you have a big file which has millions of rows, so you can create a table on top of it. So it becomes easier for us to query that file using a SQL like language. So we'll try to do that. And before we actually start looking into it, there are some steps that we'll be doing. So we'll create an application. Actually, before we go into that, I just want you to envision what we'll be doing. So we'll be reading a file that will be stored in ADLS Gen 2 account, and we'll be establishing the connection using Azure Active Directory. So we'll create an application, a service principal. We'll give proper rights to for the service principal to on the account on which we want to query the file, and then we'll use Databricks via service principal to access the file. So we will, when we are doing the demo, we will try to envision this picture in mind. If some of the steps are not making sense, maybe we'll revisit this picture in order to understand what is exactly happening. And these are the steps that we'll be performing. So we'll create an application, we'll create a secret for above application. And don't worry if it is, looking overwhelming for most of you guys, especially who are not from the data world. You can always do a demo later on, or you can always reach out to me offline so that we can discuss further. And then we'll try to provision a Databricks workspace, spin up a cluster. So we'll be doing all this starting now. Before I actually go into portal, any more questions, guys? Okay. So let's create an application first, which will create a service principal for us. So for that, we go into Active Directory. click on, sorry, I wanted to create an app, not a user. So on the left side, you will see an app registration. Click on new registration. And I found personally that, we should always stick to the naming conventions that Microsoft suggests. Many a times, especially when we are doing POCs, we tend to, lose this habit. So I've tried to, I just for everyone's benefit, whenever whenever you're spinning up a new resource in Azure world, always try to refer to the naming convention. So there's a useful article on that. So I can share the link later on. So we'll try to create an application now. So I have that already. A name. I've already created a name for us. So I think 001 is already created. So let's go with 002 and click on register. Okay, so the application has been created. So this application has created a service principal for us. Now we need to create a secret. So we'll create a new client secret. Let's say ADLS access for Databricks. Let's, the expire property, let's try to retain whatever the default option is. Click on add. Okay, so now this is important. So we have to keep this handy. So let's copy the value, save it here. Secret ID might be handy for us in the future as well. So we can save that as well. And so we have created the secret now. And this is also created. So what we would do is we will also copy this service name, service principal name, keep it handy. So if you go back to the list of steps that we had to perform, what we have done now is we have covered the first part, application. We have created a secret for that. Now, again, going back to the picture. So we are working on this part of the implementation. We have created a service principal. Now the service principal has to, have the right access so that the Databricks, when it is referring the service principal, can use the resources that are stored inside this ADLS Gen 2 account. So we are working on this part first. Now we have created the service principal. We need to give a sufficient role for this. So let's come back to our portal. So the storage account that I'm using is this one, local storage. So with the date. And you can see here, hierarchical namespace is enabled. So this is important. So you have to, if you're provisioning it, make sure that this property is enabled, or you can, if you have an existing storage account, you can enable it. And by the way, let's see which file we'll be reading. So we can go into containers. So there is a folder called hotel reviews, and under that we have an HR. So we'll be reading this file. And I think if you see here, there are a couple of attributes or columns. And yeah, so you have address and categories. So we'll be reading this file using Databricks. Now go back to the storage account. We need to give the service principal right role. So for that, we click on this access control IAM. First of all, let's see whether the service principal that we have created does have any permissions or roles assigned to it. So let's click on here. So right now it doesn't have any role assignments. So what we would have to do is, first of all, click on here, add role assignment. And so the role that you're looking for is storage blob contributor. Storage blob data contributor. So I think as a rule, if you are assigning roles, if you have the permission to assign roles, I think Microsoft suggests that go for the minimal permissions. So we don't want it to be on there. although we could have used reader as well, but we will go for contributor. So click on next. Now we would have to select the member. So in this case, this is a service principal. It's not a managed identity. So I think we have that on the clipboard. So it's coming up here. Click on select, then write your descriptions. Okay. Now, if we check for the roles, you will see that the service principal now has storage blob data contributor role. So again, coming back to the picture. So what we have done is we have completed this part of the implementation. Now we will start with the second part. Any questions so far? I mean, feel free to ask questions because I think keeping time in mind, I would just want to, be a little faster. So let's go to home. Now what we need to do is, again, going back to the deck. So we have granted storage blob contributor role to the service principal. Now we have to provision a Databricks. So that is where the real action starts. We go to Databricks. In fact, let's go to this resource group that we'll be using. So we'll be using brown bag dev, and we'll create a new Databricks account. We'll create it. Now, only this morning, I think I was having discussions with Jitu on these, how this should be provisioned. Now for this to understand, especially on the clusters, when we are spinning up the clusters, you need to have a kind of, expert level knowledge, but don't worry about it. If you just want to see the capabilities of the service, let every property be set at the default level. So, I mean, this is the resource group, and workspace name. Again, we will refer to the naming convention, and I've already have that prepared. So guys, if especially for the people who are have just started exploring Azure, and not only for that, even if you're working on-prem, I think there would be a naming convention that would be laid out in your project. So stick to that. I have a very bad habit of giving what names of my choice. So just speaking from the experience. So this should be provisioned in East US, because that is where I think we tend to have lower costs. So we select East US. So this, I think if you have not expired your trial version, you can go with this. Otherwise, you can go with standard or premium, but do your homework, which one to select. But for this purpose, we are choosing standard. So this actually applies mostly on the clusters. So if you go here, or the computing power, so if you go for premium, you have the capability of spinning up more clusters with more, computing ability, especially would be useful when you have a big data. But if that is not the need of an hour, you maybe can go with the lower configurations. So for now, we are going with standard. Okay, click on the view and create. There are a bunch of other options. For now, we will just let it be. And there is important concept of tags. This especially is used when I think in your Azure ecosystem, Azure portal ecosystem, you are having tons and not tons, maybe hundreds of services. It becomes easier if you have tags assigned to it for you to search later on. So let's click on create and review. And then we'll click on create. So what we are doing is we are creating an Azure Databrick account. We are currently under this step. So once that is done, we need to spin up a cluster. So without cluster, you will not be able to run your code. So that is needed. So Databricks will provide you capabilities of writing your code, writing your jobs. But unless you have a cluster spinned up, will not be able to touch that. So let's go back to this. This might take a few minutes. And you will soon see, or we'll explore that we can use variety of languages for us, to code. I think we have a choice of SQL, R, Scala, Python. The most widely used, I believe, is Python. In some cases, Scala is also used. And this one important thing that I wanted to highlight here is that this Spark engine, I mean, there is some programming done on this. So you have machines on those machines, you have special programs installed to get the job done. And the programs that are installed are built on Scala. So when you use Scala, you get more features out of the box as compared to Python. But you have different school of thought. So some people like Python more in comparison to Scala. But Python, if you try to learn, will have more uses than Scala. That I can say. So coming back to this, any questions? Meanwhile, this is getting provisioned. Naveen, do you have any questions? Okay, I think Naveen has forgot to put himself on mute. Okay, so now this has been provisioned. So we'll go to the resource. So this is how your first window looks like as soon as create or provision Databricks, or if you have already created, let's say the Databricks account is already created. If I click on here, this is the first window that you will see. So it has its own workspace where you will see all the components in action. So let's launch the workspace. Let's wait for it to come up. Okay, so this is how the workspace looks like. So you have a bunch of components or options here. You have workspace. They have introduced a new feature of repos recently. Then you have a recent tab, which lets you, easily navigate to the files or the folders that you have just opened. Then you have data. Then you have compute jobs. So for this session, we will just limit our discussion to workspace and compute. Compute is the place where we'll be, spinning up the clusters. Workspace is the place where we'll be writing our code or jobs, source code. So let's click on workspace. Now there are different, setups that you can provide. If you have I think if you have certain shared access for certain teams, that will come under here. The users will come under here. But what we have done in our project is we have created folders. With folders, I think it's easier to classify the source code. So we'll be doing the same. So what we will do is we'll create a new folder. Let's call it first folder. Now inside folder, we have an option to create a notebook. So we have other options as well, but for now, let's skip those. We'll create a notebook because that is the important, piece or component where you will be doing the bulk of your work if you are using Databricks. So let's call it first notebook. And that is what I was talking about here. So you have an option to choose which language you want. You have 4 options here: Python, Scala, SQL, R. Obviously, I think if you're coming from database development background, you would tend to use SQL more often. But there are some problems where SQL will not do the job for us. You would have to go for Python or Scala. So for this particular session, we'll go for Scala. And it is asking for cluster as well. So for now, we have not spinned up any cluster, but let's just create this. So this is how it looks like. So you can see what language we selected when we provisioned our first notebook. It says Scala. So what would you see on the notebook is you will see multiple commands. And all these commands until you have, like in other languages, you have a main function. Until or unless you have that main function specified somewhere, which will dictate the order of running of these commands. If you don't have that, all this run in a sequence manner. So if you have, let's say, 3 or 4 commands, it will execute the first command followed by second, followed by third. So that is how it works. And you have an option of running a particular command. You can run, so you have something called run cell. You can run a particular command, or you can run all the cells in the notebook. So that will, iterate through all the commands and run one by one. So I understand that we really don't, have enough time to code, do the coding live. So what I've done is I have, before that, let me take a step back. Before that, let us first spin up a cluster, because that is important. So for spinning up a cluster, you go to the compute tab, come in here, and you create your cluster. So let's say we call it as first cluster. Now there are tons of properties here, and I'm not fully aware of all of these, but some of these I understand. So clustered mode, we will use standard, because you remember when you were provisioning the Databricks account, it was set to standard premium. I think that was at the Databricks level, but this is at the cluster level. Yeah, just ignore me. I think this is for cluster, not for Databricks. So we will let it be. We will let it remain on standard, and then you have a concept of runtime version. So again, you have a bunch of options. We will, I think it was set to this one. So again, we will remain this to be at the standard or the default property. Then you have worker type. So this is where, when I was telling that, again, if you go back to this picture, that it gives you, a good user interface where you can specify properties like how many machines or clusters you want. So you can specify here. So it says by default, you will get 2 clusters, 2 workers, and maximum 8 workers. So if you think that can do the job for us, well and good. Otherwise, I think you can go to a value as higher as 2000. So you can keep that in mind. So for us, I think even 8 is more, so we can go for 4, because the file that we are going to read is fairly small. And you have a worker type option here as well. So machines that you're about to configure or about to spin up, what would be the configuration of those machines? So rest, I think we can set it to default. And there's one important property here, which is, so just for the users, if some of the users or some of you folks might be already using Data Factory. So in some cases, you might have to run Databricks notebooks via Data Factory. So in those cases, you would need the cluster ID. So you can fetch the cluster ID from here. But even if you know the cluster, name, that will also do the job. So let's create this. So this might take time. So what I was saying that we would not be able to do the code on the fly. So I've already prepared a notebook for us. So we'll try to import with this. You will get familiarity with the import feature as well. So for example, if you want to import your notebook in which you already have written the code, you can use this import feature. So let's go to introduction to Databricks. First code with notebooks, and then okay, let's import this. Now this is how your notebooks look like. We have already written a code here. Now, in order to read the file, again, let's envision this picture. we still have to complete this part. For this one, we will still have to make connection between Databricks and service principal. So now we will focus on that part. And for this part, we would need the command line interface, and you have to have the Python command line interface installed. So we'll launch a command prompt, and there are a bunch of statements that we have to execute. So first one is we have to navigate to the folder where we have stored our files. So we are under that folder. Okay. So just give me a second, guys. I think I'm missing a command. Just try to run this again. So ideally what should happen is we should be able to connect to the account that we have just provisioned. So I'm missing that first command where we have to we can supply the Databricks account details that we have just created. So my notes say that it should ask automatically. Maybe just a second. What happens if we give this command? Yeah. Okay. So I think we are back on track. So this is some boilerplate stuff. So if you have provisioned your Databricks account in East US, just use this URL. Otherwise, if you have created an other region, you can use that. So let's come to CLI. Now it is asking for token. Now this is with this CLI, what we are trying to do is we're trying to establish a connection to the Databricks account that we've just created. So let's go into settings. We will generate a token. And using that token, we will establish the connection to this Databricks account. Let's click on this. You can specify the lifetime here. Create, make sure that we copy this. And then we can keep it handy. Okay, so that's done. Go back to this window. Okay, now we have been able to connect to the Databricks. Databricks account. Now, so there is a concept of creating a scope. So in the code, in the source code, we'll be using that scope in order to refer to that, in order to connect to the ADLS layer. So if you go to the steps here, so what we have done is we have spinned up the cluster. Now we need to create a scope and key. So this scope and key essentially would help us in order to connect to the ADLS account. So you can store that, you can store the key in Azure Key Vault, but looking at the time, I think we will, or you can use the Databricks for storage, storing this key. But looking at the time, I think we will use the Databricks to store the key. So now what we have to do is we have to create a scope. So for this particular session, let's call it 3. I doubt that, because I was doing practice earlier, so I might have created DB session 02 already. But anyways, let's use 03 and just run this command. This command will create a scope for us. Okay. And now we need to create a key. So we need a scope and key. Now what we have to do again, let's go back to the picture. So we created a service principal, we generated a value, we created a secret for the service principal. Now that value should come as the, as the password for the scope. So we will be using that, we will be referring to that. So I think this is the value of the secret. Let's copy this. And save it here. So in this case, we are saving it on the Databricks, but you can store, or ideally you should store such kind of passwords in your Azure Key Vault. So let's close this out. Okay. So now everything is set up as far as the access is concerned. Now let's go back to our source code. We'll go back to the source code, and let's first see whether the cluster is now up and running. So cluster is running now. So sorry guys. So there is an option of terminating this cluster when your job is done. You can terminate it. And I forgot to show you in the beginning that there is a default value for that termination. I think it was set to 120 minutes. So if no activity happens for 120 minutes, the cluster will be terminated automatically. Again, go back to our file. Now, this is the point where we can, explore some of the features of Scala language. So I have prepared a slide for that. So I think this is something that we've already covered. Spark is written in Scala. So they say, or the experts say, that it is ideal for parallel processing because you have immutable variables. You have a concept of immutable variables. If you don't have that, especially when you're doing a parallel processing, the values of the variables or the objects can be overwritten. So it's a functional programming and ideal for parallel processing. This third point I personally found quite it to be very handy. So usually, let's say an X language or Python, let's say, takes 10 lines for you to write a particular logic. I've seen that with Scala you can write it in 2 or 3 lines, but you just have to explore how that works. And there is less boilerplate stuff because this is already, because we are using Spark computing engine, so we don't really have to worry about maybe, for example, adding certain libraries, because all those will already be provided to us. And at the end of the day, for the computing engine to understand, all this code that we write in Scala gets compiled to Java bytecode. And there is one more important or useful, I would not say important, useful file that I got from internet, which I can share it with you, that will help you in doing your first activities or first learnings with Scala. So obviously, whenever you start with any language, it's customary to do hello world. So you can see what the syntax for that is. Pretty much standard. We're using print ln, and you see an option of detached here. So that is where we will now attach our cluster. So we'll attach our first cluster here, and if you run this, you'll get to see the output. Hello world. So we have printed our first command. So you can go through this this file and you can run it command by command to understand how it works. I think for commenting, it works the similar way as your Java does. So you use double slashes for your comment, and yeah, I think there are other features as well that you guys can explore yourself. Now let's come back to the job in hand, the demo that we're doing, in which the code is already written. So first of all, this piece of code talks about authenticating the ADLS. So I think client ID is something that we will have to change. So client ID will be the ID of the service principal that you just created. We'll go to the Azure Data Factory. App registrations. So I think we created this one. Let's open the service principal. So let's copy this. You might want to keep it handy. Come back here, paste it. And so I think we created brown bag session 03. So we will use that. Test 123 is the key name. So you see this, using these details, it can make a connection to service principal, and then service principal can make a connection to your ADLS layer. So this is tenant ID. Tenant ID will remain the same. Here also we should change it to 03. So basically this is the path where your file is stored. If you go to home, if you go to the account, data lake storage, hotel reviews, HR. So this is hotel reviews free. This is the file. So, but we are just giving the account name for now. And there is a concept of mount point in Databricks. So let's try to understand this. So there are two ways in which you can, access files in ADLS storage. Let's say if the requirement is, if you take a example of real life world, let's say all of your files are stored in D drive, then you can create a mount point. You can basically create a mount point. So that will help you not to write the complete path in your source code time and again. So you can save that time. But if there is a there is a setup where all the files are distributed across various folders, various drives, DFE, then you have to access the files directly. So there are two ways you can access the files. One is using mount point, and the other one is using specifying the entire path. So for this particular session, we are using mount point, and that's why you see here we have given this. So here you will have to specify these scope, and then this I think you can name it anything. So we are using MNT. Now let's run this command. First of all, we have to attach a cluster to this. Let's run this. Okay. Right, my bad. We did not see the error. Okay, let's quickly do this. Okay. Now let's come back to our code. Let's see if this works. I think looks like it will be successful. Okay. So the command was successful. If there was an error, you would see some errors, in the description. So it will take some time for you to understand these messages. Now let's read the file. So this piece of code will read the file, and you can see here we are using val. So which means this df is a data frame. I mean, don't worry about the names for now, but there is the concept of immutable comes into play here. So val, when you declare any variable using val, that becomes immutable. If you declare it with var, that becomes mutable. So it's a data frame which will have the data stored in Tableau format. And if you want to see what the content in this data frame is, you can see the content that we saw in the beginning for the file being displayed there. So this is how you read the file using Databricks. Now we also have a little small concept to cover that is of delta table. Now you can store this data into a table, which is we call it a delta table. So basically there is a concept called delta lake, where you have one level of abstraction created on top of your storage layer, which will help you in using SQL-like languages to query your data. So let's create a path for that. So the tables have to be created under schema. So think of it as a database. If you're coming from SQL world. So we will create a table. We'll use two-part name, and we'll call the table as hotel reviews. And you see this syntax. It's similar to what we usually use in SQL. You are giving the name of the column, the data type. So it has its own way of writing the data types. I think in SQL, or as you know, in SQL, the string is we use varchar in order to declare columns that are string in nature, but this is how it works in Scala. Okay, so yeah. So we are using VB session 03. Just a couple of minutes more, guys. It's almost done. So we have created a table. Now we would try to write the data into this table. So using the data frame, we will write the data using the data frame where we have stored the data of the file. We will try to insert into our delta table. So let's run this again. Okay, now this is what I was talking about. So there is also a concept of changing your language. Especially when you're using SQL, because some of your operations you would want to use SQL in a notebook. So for that, you just use the symbol %SQL, and you can see here this piece of this particular command is now it's now enabled where you can write your SQL like query. So let's use this and execute it. It should be 3. Cool. So this is particularly useful. For us, it is the same data, so we will not be able to apply a where clause. But especially when you want to query, your underlining file, you can create a delta table on top of it, and you can query the file, or you can query the contents of the file. Let's go back to hotel reviews. And you can see that when you create a delta table, a folder gets created in your ADLS layer. The contents of this folder will look very unfamiliar to you, because this is some system files that the code has created. So it's a Parquet file. And then there is a delta log table, which will have the logging details. So all your asset properties you can apply on this portal reviews if you have deleted anything, and if you want to roll back your code, all those properties you can use on top of your delta tables. So with that, I think we are nearly there. It's 4:02. So with that, I think it's time to wrap up. We may can go for another 5 minutes if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll close the session. Any question, guys? I know some of it might be overwhelming, but as I said in the beginning, we can always talk offline. Okay, cool. I think we are good then. Over to you, Shiva, Paramita.
All right, Lokesh. Thank you very much, Lokesh, for this session. And thanks, in fact, for accepting our invite on a very short note and coming forward to give this session. So, Lokesh, thanks for this wonderful 2021. So I hope this would be your last brown bag session for this year. So I'll be looking at sessions for 2022. So people, this is about it for this Friday. So we have a couple of brown bag sessions for this year lined up. So we're going to close it on a very good note. And people, as I always tell, that this is a great opportunity for all you to share your knowledge and your best practices that you have learned. And it's not that only one session that you have to give in a year or in a quarter or in a month. If you think that you have got some couple of sessions or topics and best practices that you think that can help the organization to grow and your colleagues to grow professionally or personally, you're always welcome. And LNE team is always there to support you to create the platform and get the things moved. On that note, thank you very much, one and all. Wish you all a very happy and a pleasant and safe weekend. Stay safe and be wise. Thank you all. Bye, Lokesh.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Lokesh.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Lokesh. Thank you, team.